Welcome to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. A major developing story in the wrestling world where someone might be leaving AEW to return to WWE and what that means moving forward, plus why professional wrestling is like your favorite Marvel movie. This and so much more on today's Mic Drop Monday. Stay tuned. Welcome to the Mic Drop Monday, Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis, and we have a very interesting episode for everyone today. This is the 35th ever episode of the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. We celebrated a year, I believe, last month on the podcast, and it's been such a roller coaster. Not only doing this on Monday evenings now, this used to start on Fridays. Now I have a radio show through Tobacco Road Sports Radio, Out of Pocket with Michael Davis. And just want to let you guys know, we are on your social medias. We are on Facebook. We are on Instagram. We are on Spotify. We're on YouTube. You might be watching us live on Facebook. You might be watching us live on YouTube. If that is you, you can ask a question for this podcast. Wrestling topics galore. We can touch it. Wherever you want to comment for wrestling related purposes, we can answer on the show. I'm super excited for today's show. And with that said, today is December 5th. Now, not a lot of you will understand the significance around December 5th for me personally, okay? So I'm 24 years old, graduated from Appalachian State University, Roll Nears, and there was a person in my life that really helped set the trajectory for what my life would be moving forward. And his name was Mark Shoemate. And he did a lot of sound stuff for a lot of independent wrestling shows, which honestly got my foot in the door of going to independent wrestling shows. My first ever show that I got to go was like January 2005. And the main event was Tully Blanchard versus Dusty Rhodes. Obviously, a few years after they were on TV, but it was great nonetheless. I was hooked ever since. And today would have been Mark's birthday. And, you know, he passed away 9 days before my 10th birthday. And I can say after 14 years of just missing him here on earth, he had a huge impact on me. And he helped me fall in love with wrestling by allowing me to go to a lot of these wrestling shows, meet a lot of the talent, get to spend time with my dad. And so this entire episode is dedicated to him and his memory. Thank you, Mark. Love you. Thank you so much. And I went back and forth on how to start this show because it is a little emotional episode since it's December 5th. I'm going to try to find a meatball sub afterwards. But we're going to obviously touch on William Regal potentially leaving AEW for WWE later on in this episode. But I've had to defend professional wrestling for quite some time. And for the 35th episode of this podcast, you know, I kind of answer the question of, well, why do you like wrestling? Why do you like that quote unquote fake stuff? And it's pretty simple, you know, like when I usually get that question, I'm like, well, it helped me bond with my dad. And two big things that me and my dad love to bond over is Dallas Cowboys and professional wrestling. And just a couple weekends ago, it was Thanksgiving weekend, and perhaps the best weekend I've ever had with my dad. Just me and him, 3 days, nonstop wrestling at a wrestling convention here locally. And, you know, wrestling's allowed those moments. And it's a good escape from the real world where, you know, you're worried about this, that, whatever. And if you want to know, because a lot of people will say wrestling's fake and it's not for me, da 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 da. I actually think that's a lie. Okay? I think wrestling is for everyone. Okay? And I can explain this. Okay? So I was thinking, okay, what does every person love? Okay, as humans, we love stories. Okay, we love storytelling. We love listening to stories. This is why some of the best things you like tune your ears into is gossip at work, gossip within families, gossip within your friend circles. Like you're just encaptured by whoever's telling that story. We love telling stories. We love telling our side of the story. And the saying goes, you only know the truth until you hear the second story. And that's true. Okay. You look at franchises like Marvel. Okay. I'm a big Marvel fan. But I'll be honest, I haven't watched Marvel for my entire life. I think I really started getting into it around some of the Spider-Man movies and really got into it with Infinity War, the 3-hour Marvel movie. And I'm not a big movie guy, but you know what captured me? It definitely wasn't because I was, so enamored and knew all the knowledge of Marvel movies. But even in that short 3 hours. That a lot of people are like, "That's a really long movie." It's just 3 hours where they were able to tell a story. And if you watch wrestling, and this is why Marvel sells out movies like Wakanda Forever. By the way, my personal opinion, better than the first. I won't spoil it, but the entire movie of Wakanda Forever told a story. Okay? Wrestling. Okay. I believe wrestling is most successful when people understand that it's just telling a big story. Okay. And I believe wrestling is the ultimate story. Okay. Because let's keep with the Marvel comparison, right? You have Marvel, you have these superheroes, you have in wrestling these larger than life characters, and you obviously have the villain, right? And for a typical Marvel movie, you're going to have your superhero, and it's pretty obvious what's going to happen in the movie, right? You're not going to have the hero lose. You're not going to have Spider-Man lose to the antagonist, the villain, but the antagonist or the villain is going to make it really, really hard to overcome. And we're so captured, even though we know how it's going to end. It might as well, we might as well be reading the script off the entire time going in. We're captured by the story of, hey, the hero's right here, and then something happens and the antagonist gets a hold of them. Okay. And then keep going, and the hero finally overcomes, and then it's just this back and forth until at the very end of the movie, the hero comes out on top. And that can be the exact same with professional wrestling. Now, the cool thing about professional wrestling is while it's scripted and while the wrestlers know what's going to happen, the fans don't really know. I mean, we can have a good guess. I've had good guess that Roman Reigns is going to hold the title through next year's WrestleMania, but we never know. A lot of stuff happens, injuries happen, uh, plans change, but not often does the fan favorite win. The good guy doesn't always win with wrestling. That keeps the glory going, because if the face and the good guys won all the time in wrestling, then there wouldn't be a real story. Because wrestling tells story in three different ways. Long-term storytelling. Okay? This is you're basically following a TV show with this certain story for months on end. There's no real off season with it. This a feud, a rivalry can go 2-3 weeks. I'd call that like short term storytelling. You're trying to only get to your next big event and then move on to something else. You have long term storytelling. I feel like AEW has done great with this in terms of the Jericho Appreciation Society and Blackpool Combat Club. That story's been going on for at least a year, but then they're capturing stuff that happened between Jericho and John Moxley, Dean Ambrose from WWE back when they were in WWE. And that's a good example of long-term storytelling where as a fan you're captured and you're continuing to watch and you want to know how it all unfolds or how it ends. So long term, short term over a few weeks, and then one night. You really only have 15, 20 minutes at most, give or take. I would say on average 15, 20 minutes during a wrestling match. Some are a lot shorter, some are a lot longer to tell a story. And that's really cool because you can tell that back and forth in just 15, 20 minutes. And I was listening to Sami Zayn's podcast with Stone Cold for the Broken School sessions you can find on Peacock. And Sammy was talking about his Johnny Knoxville match, which I am outspoken about. I did not enjoy. I'm not a fan of Johnny Knoxville. A lot of it didn't make sense to me. But then listening to Sami Zayn talk about his match, I was like, huh, there were moments where it made sense for the story that Sami Zayn could really carry somebody who's not an athlete at all, who just throws his body to the wind for, likes, giggles, whatever you have. And Sami Zayn was able in one night to tell a story where some fans who love Johnny Knoxville or love Sami Zayn love that match. I may have to go back and watch and just see how all the story fit together. But, watching a lot of stuff over the weekend a couple weeks ago, it was perfect. You had a couple indie shows where I attended and was like, wow, they're able to tell a story and they're able to make you want to come back for their next event. And on the same token, Impact Wrestling had a really Southpaw regional wrestling satire show with it, which wasn't bad. It was still entertaining and enjoyable, but I struggled because I didn't know the characters they were trying to portray because they were trying to set back in like 1975. I had trouble following stories and being invested in who won. So you can get the good, you can get the bad. And I think someone who is benefiting greatly from telling stories is the Bloodline. The Bloodline starting with Roman Reigns and him coming back as somebody who wants to claim the throne, head of the table, live up to his full potential, not really regarding the fans anymore, and just doing whatever he can to reach his ultimate goal, which is the long-term storytelling part. Well, it starts with Roman Reigns facing Jey Uso, facing Jimmy Uso, and making them fall in line behind him. And there was a lot of family stuff that they played into in terms of the story where Jey Uso wasn't marketable as a singles competitor. True? I would say so. It was always Jay and Jimmy. Well, Jimmy's gone, I think, from injury or maybe an arrest, who knows. And Roman Reigns is able to make fans invested into Jey Uso and what he brings to the table. And then all of a sudden we get the Sami Zayn added layer. A lot of people were like, okay, we could add Solo Sikoa, we could add Tamina. Who could we add to the bloodline? And they add somebody who's not even related to any of Roman's family, but it's that added layer of Sami and Jimmy getting along. Roman Reigns kind of using Sami Zayn to his advantage, and Jey Uso just not trusting Sami as far as he could throw him. And then what was the coolest part about Survivor Series War Games? Because we didn't have an episode last week, kind of recovering from Thanksgiving weekend and everything. The biggest part of the Survivor Series War Games event was the storytelling. War Games now is not as hardcore extreme as it was back in WCW. It's not. WWE's not going to allow it to be. So you have to play to your strength of storytelling. And the fact that Roman Reigns, just this little bit of storytelling, pulling Jimmy Uso back in. If you're not familiar with the War Games concept, you start with two people, and one by one, people are added into the match. Well, Roman stops Jimmy Uso to go help save his twin brother, and instead puts Sami Zayn in the ring. Sami and Jay not trusting each other go throughout the match where Sami Zayn has to turn on his childhood friend, Kevin Owens, to prove his allegiance to the bloodline. And now he's fully accepted by everyone in the bloodline. That's a story. That's not something where I'm like, oh, they did this cool move off the top of the cage, which they could have. Oh, somebody went through a table. They could have. Oh, that was a great finisher. It was all storytelling. That is the coolest thing about professional wrestling is the storytelling. Now, where they go from here? Eventually, they're going to turn on each other. Eventually, that's going to happen. And eventually, you're going to get The Rock versus Roman Reigns for Roman's eventual main goal, which was to get the head of the table, to get the tribal chief status. And that's what you get. And I think it's really cool. I think it's awesome that WWE was able to tell a story. That WWE was able to tell a story through Survivor Series War Games. And at the end of the day, if you have not watched wrestling, I feel like everyone can find something they at least enjoy. And there's alternates now. Okay. For 6-7 years ago, there wasn't really a good alternate. There was WWE, and then you had to scour for something else. Either go to an independent show, go try to find something from Japan, Mexico. TNA was around, wasn't doing great. ROH was around, didn't have the stars, and it just struggled. Well, now we got AEW. Now we have WWE. Now we have still Japan. Indie wrestling, probably the best ever with stars now because WWE is no longer monopolizing the industry like they were. But the big thing is if you can find a story that you can get behind, then you are able to enjoy wrestling just like you're able to enjoy your movies, just like you're able to enjoy your Marvel. And it's going to be a great time. I always advise you, just find what you like, keep looking. It's just like leftovers in my mom's house. We may have leftovers you may not eat for the 5 dishes that we have in the fridge, but there's that one you're going to eat and you'll enjoy it. And it's a really big thing. And when we come back, it is being reported that William Regal is potentially leaving AEW for WWE. We got to get into that right next after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. If you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, you can be a part of the show. You can comment on our comments. Your comment can pop up on the screen right where you see my name right there with our Insta, Drop the Mic Wrestling. Go follow us. Your comment will pop up right there. We'll get to talk about whatever you wish to talk about. But until then, we're going to talk about William Regal. The report coming out that William Regal is leaving AEW for a return to WWE. And this is kind of crazy. You didn't expect this to come across your news feed today. And, my initial reaction is like, I'm not surprised because William Regal honestly is a WWE guy. He's a very loyal WWE guy. I was more surprised when he got released last year. Vince McMahon trying to do the 2.0 thing. Triple H was out of commission due to health issues. And William Regal got the boot as they're trying to rebrand and remarket. That surprised me. But I am surprised that William Regal it feels like he just got to AEW. It really does. And now he's leaving. It doesn't make sense. We had Ryan Frick on the YouTube channel a couple weeks ago talking the Full Gear preview, and he brought up a really good point. I was like, hey, this might be where MJF uses brass knuckles to get a win over Jon Moxley and win. And Ryan Frick added the caveat that Regal hands MJF the Nux. Well, that's exactly what happened. Regal slid the Nux to MJF. MJF hit Moxley and wins. It's been a very emotional 2 weeks between Danielson saving William Regal from a beatdown to Jon Moxley to the following week, William Regal introducing the new AEW World Champion and then eventually getting knocked out from behind with his neck issues, with his brain issues by MJF, the World Champion, and having to be carted out of AEW. Like, first of all, great selling by William Regal, not even moving inside the ring. That was incredible storytelling. And a lot of people were like, okay, that writes Regal off screen for a little bit. We'll see where it happens. And now to actually find out that this could be his write off AEW, period. I thought William Regal's contract was longer, and it was originally reported that it was going to be 3 years. And so if these are true, if these reports are true, if Tony Khan let him out of his contract early, that says something. Because why do you let a guy like William Regal just walk? Is it a respect thing that Tony Khan has for William Regal? Is it okay, we can work out something? I don't know what it is. Is Tony Khan like, okay, William Regal's not an on-screen talent. He's not a Malachi Black or a Miro or an Andrade, who are people rumored to want to go back to WWE now the regime change. But if Tony Khan let him out of his contract this early, he's not even been with the company a year. Okay. He came to AEW this year. Like, this is crazy. And when it comes to Regal's AEW legacy, first of all, William Regal's legacy in all of professional wrestling is stellar. In AEW, he helped the Blackpool Combat Club. Claudio Castagnoli, Bryan Danielson, Jon Moxley don't need any rub right now, honestly. They're big stars on their own. But for William Regal to kind of be the glue that made a group of the Blackpool Combat Club make sense to team up, he helped elevate all three of those guys. He's already helped elevate Wheeler Yuta just by associating with him. He's helped elevate MJF. If you look back to that email that was sent in terms of real life, or they just wrote it for the story, we just got done talking about how important the storytelling is in professional wrestling. By reading that email, MJF, William Regal, I mean, this was a big deal. This was a big deal for MJF to read that email, get so emotional, get so frustrated, and all of a sudden, MJF win. And was Regal's last night, MJF laying out William Regal, like being the villain, being the ultimate villain, being the devil, as he calls himself. That was the entire glamour, enamor of William Regal. And that's Regal's purpose in wrestling right now, is to elevate these stars. And so if he elevated Maxwell Jacob Friedman right before he leaves, great. And who's telling like what he did backstage in terms of all the interactions he had with the wrestlers, advice unseen by us, which makes this a big loss for AEW behind the scenes. And it feels like it's gone before it began. Like, it ended before it started. That's what William Regal's AEW reign would be if this is the very end, and that was the last we saw of William Regal last week. Now this WWE return. Triple H is in charge. I told you on the podcast, this is what's going to be changing. People are going to come back. Triple H is running things his way, which means I assume that William Regal would resume a spot with the Performance Center with NXT for development, making William Regal and Shawn Michaels the main guys for developing WWE stars of today and tomorrow. That's his bread and butter. William Regal could get a promotion and do just well in that as well. But I believe that this means William Regal is going to return to NXT, help build that brand back up, help the stars of tomorrow, and WWE gets back a fountain of knowledge that was, to me, of the last 3 years, I think that was the biggest loss of WWE. And that's seeing a lot of these guys like Bryan Danielson walk away, Bray Wyatt get fired, Braun Strowman get fired. Like, it's all a lot of those. Claudio leaving for AEW. Well, William Regal is going to help all your younger talent. And that you can't replace, because he's having an impactful hand on this business. And he's going to help those guys in NXT. He's going to help his son, Charlie Dempsey is William Regal's son. He's getting started in NXT. And I think that has a factor to do with it. William Regal wanting to be around his son, who is in NXT, who's signed with WWE, wanting to make sure he has a good career, but also spend quality time with your son. Just like I enjoy spending quality time with my dad, just like I'll enjoy spending quality time with my kids someday. I feel like that played a factor in this decision. And then AEW talent who might want to leave for WWE. That could happen. I feel like this opens the door. And I said this about Cody. When Cody Rhodes opted not to re-sign with AEW and join WWE, he was the first name to jump from AEW to WWE. And this was during the Vince McMahon regime. Well, Triple H takes over and he's re-signed a lot of his guys back. But a lot of these AEW guys, like Miro, like Malachi Black, like Andrade, are still under contract with AEW. Is Tony Khan going to have conversations with them if they want out of their contract? We just saw Malachi Black and Buddy Matthews return to AEW. Hopefully they stay. I'd love for them to. Miro, I feel like Miro really needs WWE right now. If he's wanting to wrestle, if he's enjoying his lifestyle, he'll probably stay. But I could totally see Miro and Andrade being two names that are going to Tony Khan's office and saying, hey, you let William Regal go back. Can you let us go back as well? It could happen, guys. And so we'll get into a break. When we come back, we're going to do our beloved segment of a Rose, Bud, and Thorn. We're going to talk about NXT Deadline this weekend and what else to look forward to as we go into this week right after the break. Welcome back to the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Davis. Just a reminder, if you're joining us on Facebook or YouTube live right now, you can see all the social media accounts. You got YouTube, we got Spotify, we got Facebook, we got Instagram at Drop the Mic Wrestling that you can follow us for content throughout the week. We're just continuing to grow. And if you're watching live, you get the privilege, you get the ability to ask any wrestling related question. As we are in our final segment of the evening, your comment will pop up on the screen and we'll get to acknowledge it. If you have a comment about wrestling, we can do that as well. But we've been gone a couple weeks, got to celebrate Thanksgiving last week, went to a wrestling convention, and now it's time for your Rose, Bud, and Thorn. I tried to keep it to 7 days, even though there's a lot of stuff that's happened over the last 14 days. And my Rose has got to be Dax and Danielson. This would have been my Bud going into last week. If we had an episode last week on Monday night, that would have been my Bud, was Dax Harwood versus Bryan Danielson. Listen to Dax Harwood talk about this match in Jeff Jarrett's podcast that I got the ability to sit into, and that got me hyped for that. And it did not disappoint. It was hard hitting. Dax Harwood is honestly, he and Bryan Danielson are really good storytellers. And if anything, Dax Harwood has elevated himself as a storyteller. And he gets more credit now that he's had these single matches. And he's had single matches with some of the best talent in the world, Bryan Danielson alike. And his stock's elevated because of matches like this. If you didn't watch Dax Harwood versus Bryan Danielson, you have to. A Thorn, let's be honest, there's not a lot of bad stuff going on in wrestling right now. So if I had to guess, MJF's new title, as much as I love MJF, and I'm excited to hear him have a microphone in his hands this Wednesday, seeing if he'll mention this William Regal stuff going down. I feel like the big Burberry belt, whatever he calls it, was a letdown. When he started mentioning a new title, I'm like, okay, AEW's been around for 3 years. You can get a new title. And it just was a new strap. Didn't really need a huge presentation with it, other than what it eventually set up with MJF turning on William Regal. It fits MJF's character, but I wanted a new title. And my Bud, if you have been listening to the podcast for 4 or 5 months, I was like, this match needs to happen. The Acclaimed are defending the AEW World Tag Team titles this Wednesday night against FTR. I don't understand why it's on TV. I don't understand why it's not at Winter's Coming. I don't understand why they're giving this match away. But that's the good thing about AEW is they give these premium matches away on Dynamite weekly. It's FTR versus the Acclaim. I've been excited for this match. I want to say FTR wins. Like, I really do. I want to say FTR wins, holds the titles, and then you have a big match, FTR versus, I wanted to say Young Bucks. That probably won't happen, but FTR versus another big tag team at the Revolution pay-per-view, and you can elevate a new tag team, but it's FTR versus the Acclaimed. Everybody loves the Acclaimed. Everybody loves FTR, and it's going to be awesome. We'll talk a little bit about, AEW Dynamite, because you have Acclaim versus FTR. You have MJF on the mic again. You have Samoa Joe versus Darby Allin for the TNT title. I'm assuming Samoa Joe wins this. It's going to be a good match. Darby's going to get thrown around, but we're really setting up for Samoa Joe and Wardlow at ROH Final Battle later this month. And then we got Claudio and Wheeler Yuta versus Jake Hager and Danny Garcia. That's going to be a good match. Again, Jericho Appreciation Society, Blackpool Combat Club. That's been a long story. And if you were a fan of storytelling, they have done a really great job just making everything feel fresh. But this is starting to wind down. I don't know what the big payoff will be, but you can look forward to that on AEW Dynamite. Tonight, we got NXT Deadline this weekend, right? We got the Iron Survivor Challenge. Now, I was a fan of Championship Scramble back in SummerSlam 2008, I believe. I believe that was 08, maybe even 09. But it was really a one-and-done concept. And it feels like they've revamped the rules a little bit. So the Iron Survivor Challenge for NXT Deadline says 2 wrestlers are going to start the match every 5 minutes. The wrestlers are going to enter until all of them are there. And there's going to be a predetermined time limit. They haven't really mentioned this after the last wrestler enters. And they're going to be able to score pinfall, submission, and they're going to accumulate points. And if you're a fan of hockey, there's going to be a penalty box for 90 seconds if you're ever pinned or submitted or you get disqualified for whatever reason. And the winner of the match is whoever scores the most points at the end of the time limit. I don't know if pinfall, submission, and DQ victories all equate the same. I feel like pin should be 1, submission should be 2. I don't know what disqualification would be, but the winners of these matches are going to challenge for the NXT title and the NXT Women's title. So this feels like a combination of an Iron Man match and Championship Scramble. I feel like they're kind of undetermined with how long this will last. There's still some questions. Can you make pinfalls before all 5 enter the ring? Because it give you the advantage of being in early, accumulating as many falls as you can, but it also lose your stamina, fatigue. So it's a really great concept. I'm pretty excited. Shawn Michaels, obviously the king of Iron Man matches. You think of his match versus Bret Hart, the 60-minute Iron Man match at WrestleMania that went to overtime before Shawn Michaels beat Bret Hart and the boyhood dream came true. And when I think about who likely wins, I feel like Mandy Rose is going to be champion. I don't know who she faces this weekend. They haven't announced an opponent for it, if she even does. I would think Alba Fire still has a chance, but I feel like Roxanne Perez could win this. Have the Women's Iron Survivor Challenge go first. A face wins it. Roxanne, I'd say Cora Jade, but heel versus Mandy Rose as a heel. Zoe Stark just turned heel. Kiana James is a heel. You have either Wendy Chu, Fallon Henley, or Indy Hartwell. I mean, other than Wendy Chu, Fallon Henley, I don't see them. I feel like it's Roxanne Perez. And for the men, you got JD McDonough, you got Grayson Waller, you got Joe Gacy. You either have Von Wagner, Axiom, or Andre Chase. Unfortunately, I think it's going to be Von Wagner. Not a big fan of what he's doing right now. But the winner of the guys, Carmelo Hayes. He is him. It is time for Carmelo Hayes. And I'm excited to see what he does. NXT deadline, those matches. Braun Breaker's probably going to beat Apollo Crews. So we'll get Braun Breaker versus Carmelo Hayes at the beginning of the year. That's your match. Like, that's the match you've been building for 2 years. And before either of those guys get in the main roster, we need to see that match. And, Monday Night Raw tonight, we got the Usos versus Matt Riddle and Elias for the tag titles. The winner of this match, spoiler alert, it's going to be the Usos, are going to face Drew McIntyre and Sheamus for the tag titles on SmackDown. So 2 big tag title matches. Honestly, seeing the Usos hold these titles until an eventual turn with Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn win the titles. But I'm really excited. And this was almost my bud. There is a rumor going around that there is a big high-stakes poker match for JBL and Baron Corbin tonight on Monday Night Raw. And there is a big rumor that this could be the debut, finally, of Cameron Grimes in the main roster on Monday Night Raw. If it is, well-deserved. I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to be watching live tonight at 8 Monday Night Raw to see if Cameron Grimes has that opportunity. But hey, this is a big week for wrestling. As always, I've been your host, Michael Davis, for the Drop the Mic Wrestling Podcast. Another Mic Drop Monday. Share, save all our social media. You got your YouTube. You can subscribe. You got your Spotify. You can subscribe. Both of those free, by the way. You got Facebook, which you can like. You got Instagram at Drop the Mic Wrestling that you can follow. It is a great time to be a wrestling fan. It's a great time because storytelling is a focus in wrestling now, and you should go find the story that intrigues you and that you enjoy. Well, with that said, enjoy wrestling. Let's check back in next week, see how this Iron Survivor Challenge goes. But with that, this has been another Mic Drop Monday.